Okay, let's just start with the basics. What is your name and your title?
Oh, my name is Laura Adams Shimabukuro, and my title is the Chief of Occupational Therapy at Hawaii State Hospital.
All right. Where and when did you work in pediatrics?
I worked at the Variety School in Honolulu, it's off Diamond Head, and I worked there from January of 1980 until September of 1989.
Cool. We just had a field trip there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
It was nice. Okay, question one. What is the most common diagnosis that you've come across?
In the pediatric?
In the pediatric setting.
At that time, the children that we worked with primarily had learning disabilities.
Okay.
Dyslexia, maybe some sensory issues, difficulty with being able to process educational information in traditional ways.
What kind of interventions were there?
There were a lot of different interventions. Besides OT, which I'll explain a little bit more in a minute what I did, but we also had a speech pathologist who worked with kids. We had specially trained teachers who worked with them. One of the teachers at one time brought this teaching method called the Slingerland method for teaching reading, writing, and spelling skills, and what I liked about that particular class was that it was very multisensory. It included kinesthetic learning, auditory and visual cues and learning, and I saw one child go from being unable to write at all to, because he had such serious dysgraphia, I guess that's the word, anyway, to having the most beautiful handwriting. And what I did in OT, I did a lot of sensory integration, sensory motor activities with the kids, and worked on a lot of visual perceptual skills with them, because they tended, with dyslexia, the outward signs of dyslexia usually are reversed handwriting or inability to spell, sort of sequencing and figure ground activities, things like that. They were difficult for them.
That's great. Okay. I guess I already answered this question. Could you compare and contrast the difference between where you're currently working and pediatrics?
Oh my gosh,
That's
day and night. Yeah, well, I don't know about
I guess the
lengthy,
nutshell version.
it's day and night. Where I worked was with all children, age 12 and under, down to preschool. They were not infants or toddlers, but they were anywhere from 3 to 12 years old. Generally, because it was a private school and a private special type of school, we had kids from maybe a higher socioeconomic status, not necessarily, because the school did give scholarships and things, but it was private, so everyone who had their child enrolled there, it was their choice. There was nothing that was forced about it, and it was very small. I think we had, oh gosh, I don't know, 50 or 60 kids maybe in the school. There were preschool, I think 6 classrooms that had a teacher, a full-time teacher, and a full-time aide. There was a full-time OT, myself, one OT who was I was the OT, one speech therapist, one she called herself adapted PE teacher, and one administrator and a couple of secretaries, and that was the staffing. And it was also privately funded, so between the parents' tuition to pay for it, the school also had fundraisers or had some sponsors, including the Variety Club, and back in those days the Carol Kai bed race
Okay.
was the biggest single fundraising activity.
Does that still go on?
No. They kind of switched it up with the Aloha Run,
Okay.
which does still go on. So that was, and that was a 35-hour a week, 9.5 months a year job. So summers off, Christmas vacation, spring break, all of the usual kind of perks that, from that perspective, that come with working in a school system, and very low pay. Contrasted to the state hospital, this is a population of adults. We have around 200 patients in the hospital, where I think we're licensed for 202, and our census fluctuates from about 185 to 205. It is not a voluntary place to be for most of our patients. We have a few patients who are here on a status of being called voluntary, which means they don't need the court to allow them to leave the hospital. They needed only a doctor's order, but the reason they're here is because they have such profound problems. They are very difficult to place in the community. There just isn't a community setting that has enough services and enough, enough of whatever that for these folks to be safely placed. Whether it's a matter of them being safe, not so much that they would go out and hurt somebody else, although they might, but they just have really profound difficulties with communication and serious problems with their illness, primarily schizophrenia.
Yes.
Also here we have a large number, most of our patients are here coming through the court system. It could be any one of a variety of offenses that got them here. It could be as minor as jaywalking or littering, or it could be as major as murder or rape. We have a lot of patients that come to us. I think I just was looking at something like maybe about just under half the patients are here for fitness evaluations, that meaning that they have to be determined fit to stand trial. So they are not even adjudicated yet. They're charged with a crime, but they might not be held responsible for the crime. That's what the fitness hearing is about, to determine when they can understand the proceedings. That's when they go to court and then are adjudicated, determined whether they knew what they were doing or didn't know what they were doing.
How long is that limbo of just being?
Gosh, it can be, usually it's at least 3 months, but it can go on for a long time.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Then the other half of our patients who are remanded to the state hospital for care and treatment. If recently there was legislation about a year ago that said if the person is committed to the hospital and it's a misdemeanor crime that does not involve hurting another person, then basically they can't be locked up longer than they would be if they had been jailed for it. So if they were littering or jaywalking and they would have been found guilty and sent to jail, and they would have spent 90 days in jail, then that's how it is here. It's like, okay, you've time served and you can go.
That's only for certain
That's
crimes?
certain kinds of crimes, yeah.
Okay.
And those would be misdemeanors that don't involve threat or harm to.
Okay. So those that do involve threat and harm, what's
those that do involve threat and harm, if they are adjudicated and found to be not guilty by reason of insanity and then committed to the state hospital, they have to go through a process where the treating physician writes a letter to the court when he thinks that the patient is stable enough to be safe to be discharged. And then the court appoints an independent 1 or 3 panel, which is from 1 up to 3 community psychologists or psychiatrists who interview the patient, review the record, make a recommendation if they are in agreement that the patient can be safely discharged to the community or not.
Okay.
And then, after the 3 panel has weighed in, and that usually will take about 4 months, then the case goes back to court and the judge determines whether or not the patient should be released based on the reports of the independent panel plus the reports of the hospital. So usually the patient, that particular patient could possibly be here anywhere from 6 months to a year before any of that process is started. If the patient goes all the way through the process and is denied discharge by the judge, then in a year he can reapply.
Okay. Let's go to the number 4.
So it's a good idea to not think that if you've committed a crime and a person is thinking, oh, I'll just go to the state hospital and
that'll be time spent.
it'll be time served and it'll be a cushy time served. It doesn't always work out that way.
No.
It might be cushier here, but you might not get out.
All right. What is the role of the OT and OTA in pediatrics?
Oh, in pediatrics, well, I was the only occupational therapist at that site, and so, and I didn't have an OT aide or a CODA.
Okay.
And so what I would do is I would do assessments on all of the kids. I would look at their motor skills. I would look at visual perceptual skills. Would look at sensory, motor sensory integration skills, and then based on the formal assessments I gave them, I would determine if I thought they could benefit from OT treatment.
Cool.
And then I would usually schedule them see them a couple of times a week. And I had my own sort of office/classroom, so I would see the kids either individually or in small groups, schedule them with the teacher as to what would be the best time to pull them out of the class and work with them. It was a really fun job. I enjoyed it a lot at the time.
Sounds great. What other team members were involved with patient or child care, and what is your relationship to them? I guess the teachers.
Yeah, there were teachers, teachers' aides, a speech therapist, an adapted PE teacher, and we would meet to do the individualized education plan. We'd meet, the IEP. We met with the parents. I want to say twice a year, but it may have been more often than that. May have been quarterly. I don't really remember because it's been a long time ago. But we would meet with them to discuss whatever our test findings were and to develop the IEP, and then meet with them again to discuss progress on the individualized education plan.
What form of documentation is most common in that setting?
In that setting, I think quarterly we had to write a quarterly report. It's like a report card. Fill out documents and papers that said what the child had been working on and how he had improved or not improved and what the plan for the next quarter would be.
Did you have to fill out daily progress reports or SOAP notes per visit?
Not at that time at that place, no.
Okay. So just quarterly reports.
Yeah. It may be a lot more something by now, I don't know. But being that it was a private facility too, it wasn't as possibly maybe as regimented as the DOE. I really don't know.
Okay. What medical care setting is the majority of pediatric clients in? I guess for you,
I have no idea. That was
the
just
school,
yeah. That was just a private school for children with learning disabilities. So we were not really associated with any medical facility. We did have a board. In fact, one of the board members at that time was Dr. Bill Sheehan, who is our current medical director here. Small world.
Cool. What kind of equipment and assistive technology did you utilize?
At the school?
Yeah.
Swings, scooter boards, mats. A lot of just SI kind of equipment that was standard in the 80s. Sensory objects. Gosh, it's been so long ago. Sort of like our sensory room that Yvonne has now, except that we had more space, and so we had them. I would put together little obstacle courses for them to go through, where they would have to belly crawl, or they'd have to roll, or they'd have to somersault. Anyway, trying to get a lot of different kinds of proprioceptive input and tactile input and sensory input.
What determines, if you know what determines reimbursement, and how does that affect OT? I know you said it's private, so...
Well, at that school, yeah, the school was private, and so it just paid a salary to all of its employees, and I don't know whether or not, I think it was just based on the tuition that the parents paid, and then whatever funds the school could raise. I don't believe at that time, anyway, that anybody was, like, on Medicaid or anything like that, or even if they were using private health insurance. I have no idea, because I really was not involved in that aspect of anything, and I wasn't aware of it, so I'm guessing that at that time it wasn't, and people weren't trying to access that sort of payment.
One more question.
Mm-hmm.
What hazards or safety precautions does an OT face on a daily basis at that setting?
At that setting?
Yeah.
Well, I guess, when you're working with children, you need to be very aware of that their systems are younger. Things might be more intensely perceived, different kinds of stimulation and so forth. Generally, I think, especially in comparison to this job, there's not that much precautions you have to worry about. These kids did not have problems with sight, did not have physical limitations for the most part. I did have a couple of kids who had cerebral palsy or other kinds of motor impairments, but for the most part, the kids I worked with at that time were pretty free from those kinds of disabilities. And so mainly I just wanted, if I had them on the scooter board, to make sure that they were being safe and not horsing around, and of course it's it's a lot worse now with
Parents suing?
well, yeah, people suing or people accusing people of inappropriate touching or anything like that. That was just kind of like not even on the radar in those days. And so you know, maybe now you would always want to be working with groups with other, in groups with groups. I don't know. I don't know how they do it over there now.
Yeah, I think when we went to Variety, they work together with another aide or something like that now. But thank you so much for
Oh, sure, no
taking
problem.
time out to do
Yeah.
the interview.
Well, yeah,
That's
you're
cool.
welcome. And yeah, if you have a chance, you might talk to Yvonne, because she was there from when I left. She was there for a few years. I don't know how many years.
She's also at Variety?
She was at Variety, yeah, and she's here now. And I think Variety now serves primarily autistic kids.
Yes.
And at that
Autism.
time, it was just LD kids, and there were some who were probably on the spectrum, but it wasn't like primary diagnosis.
Do you think it was because it was they weren't being diagnosed back then?
You know, I really don't know if it was because they weren't being diagnosed or if it was because there was a trend maybe to focus funds and resources on the more profoundly disabled children, and I really don't have any idea what happened. If they couldn't get the maybe most of the sort of bright LD kids went to Asset School instead of Variety or something. I really don't know how it is that they moved into working with kids that are more in the autistic